people like me. You need people like me so you can point your f***ing fingers and say, that's the bad guy.
The undisputed super featherweight champion of the world, Alicia, the Baumgardner.
That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy. That's the bad guy.
Welcome to the motherfucking relay. We're covering today's top boxing news.
Okay, we'll start with this. It appears that the fight is back on. Alicia Baumgardner versus Hyun-Mi Choi, WBA reorders junior lightweight championship fight. Initially, this fight was ordered, but Hyun-Mi Choi said she suffered some kind of an injury.
Not sure what exactly she injured, and the timing of it was very convenient.
Alicia Baumgardner is back at the negotiation table with the fighter whose title she claimed earlier this year. BoxingScene.com has confirmed that the WBA has ordered a mandatory title fight between Baumgardner
This division's undisputed champion.
and Hyun-Mi Choi. The previously ordered fight last fall ended with Choi filing a medical exemption for which she was downgraded to a champion in recess. The unbeaten former titleist is now at the head of the line to not only challenge for her old belt, but all the other chips.
She's not the only one. She's not the only mandatory challenger. Alicia has two. There is Hyun-Mi Choi by way of the WBA and former champion Delphine Persoon by way of everybody else.
Most familiar with these fighters, Alicia, Hyun-Mi, and Delphine. Most would prefer to see Alicia take on Delphine Persoon because they know what Delphine's capable of. They know that Delphine can make more of a fight of it than Hyun-Mi Choi can. The problem is, none of those three other alphabet organizations have actually ordered a fight between Alicia and Delphine.
WBA has. They're ordering this fight.
Choi's injury prevented her from stepping into the ring when she was due to face Baumgardner, who was the official challenger. WBA Championships Committee Chairman Carlos Chavez said in a ruling obtained by Boxing Scene, for that reason, Baumgardner was given the chance to fight for the vacant title against Elham Mekhaled last February. Now that Choi is recovered from her injury, she must face Baumgardner, and the winner will keep the title as stipulated by the WBA rules. In case they cannot reach an agreement within the given period of time, the WBA may call for an auction.
A purse bid.
Last fall, Hyun-Mi Choi pulled out injured. They labeled her a champion in recess, and very recently, that recess ended. In Hyun-Mi Choi's own neck of the woods, she took on former champion Maria Moderna of Argentina, racked herself up another win.
It was a few weeks ago.
The two sides now have 30 days from the time of Friday's ruling to reach a deal and avoid a purse bid hearing. Detroit's Baumgardner fully unified the division after a 10-round win over France's own
Elham Mekhaled.
Just because the WBA ordered this fight doesn't mean that Hyun-Mi Choi wants it. I mean, just because they ordered it, does that mean they're in talks? They're in the process of making it, or is this just the order coming down?
Forgive me if I'm curt.
Forgive me if I'm cynical, but I'm not convinced that Hyun-Mi Choi was actually injured. I'm convinced that she just did what she had to do at that time late last year to pull out of that fight, because most familiar with both of these fighters, they know.
They do.
Hyun-Mi Choi don't stand a chance against Alicia.
None.
She is lacking in most every department compared to Alicia. And in all likelihood, she's not just gonna lose.
No.
She's gonna get stopped.
She's gonna get knocked the fuck out.
Hyun-Mi Choi does not have the ceiling that Alicia Baumgardner has. Hyun-Mi Choi previously held the title dating back to 2014, when she was upgraded from her interim title status. The 32-year-old from Seoul, South Korea, went on to make 10 successful defenses in what was the sport's longest active reign before the demotion. Her first non-title fight in more than 9 years saw Choi claim a 10-round victory over Maria Moderna in July.
Past July.
Last month, the fight took place just hours before Baumgardner's latest win, a 10-round unanimous decision over former two-time WBO junior welterweight titleist Cristina Linardatu.
Their rematch. Christina's the only one to ever beat Alicia.
Now, they are 1-1 with each other, and I reiterate, just because the WBA orders the fight doesn't mean Hyun-Mi Choi wants it. she can decide to walk away, and I wonder if she will. I always got the sense that the reason she pulled out injured late last year is because she figured at some point this year, Alicia would move up and then she could come back and reclaim the WBA title once it was vacant and once Alicia wasn't holding it. I always felt like that was Hyun-Mi Choi's real plan.
Hyun-Mi Choi reigned as a champion for 9 years. For what it's worth, she is an accomplished fighter. She's been a champion at 2 weights.
She was a champion at super featherweight for a very long time, 9 years. Several successful title defenses, though a remnant of the previous era of women fighters, when there weren't as many talented fighters running around, fighters like Alicia.
She was able to reign for such a long time because there weren't really that many credible threats to her title reign, not unless we're talking champions, and she didn't unify with any of them.
You have to consider that if she was champion at this weight for 9 years, that's 9 years that she could have unified with somebody, and there have been other fighters, other champions at this weight, but as it stands, her entire 9-year reign as WBA super featherweight champion, she didn't unify with anybody.
Tack on a sparse schedule of activity. The last 5 years, she's been averaging 1 fight a year for the last 5, going on 6 years.
So in tandem with less than ambitious matchmaking, no unification matches, and a sparse schedule of activity, you can see how and why she reigned for so long.
But over the years, the women's ranks have been populating with amateur standouts and ambitious young fighters, special fighters like Alicia.
I know that most people would prefer to see Baumgardner versus Pursoon, but that fight hasn't been ordered. And I'll be honest, any opportunity I get to look at Alicia, I relish it.
Because she's hot.
She can fight her fucking ass off. The virtue of this is a quick turnaround. Another opportunity for Alicia to get out there and perhaps rack up a highlight reel knockout, because Hyun-Mi Choi, she ain't got nothing for her.
Not as fast, not as strong, not as athletic, not as defensively responsible.
Doesn't have Alicia's boxing brain or explosive power, fast twitch muscles. I feel like if you put Hyun-Mi Choi in the ring with Alicia, Alicia's gonna stop her.
That being said, I question as to whether or not this is a fight that Hyun-Mi Choi really wants.
We'll find out. Men's welterweight news. Jaron Ennis says that he's still open to fighting Errol Spence Jr., either Terrence Crawford or Errol Spence Jr. Either would be enough for Jaron Ennis.
He's the IBF's mandatory challenger, but he's not going to get either of those guys.
And I told you that ahead of the fight. I told you that beforehand. It was an okay fight, Ennis told YSM Sports Media. Bud did his thing. The action may have been mundane, but Crawford's clear-cut victory has officially moved up to the top of the welterweight division's mountain. According to Ennis, his latest showing would leave no doubt in terms of who's the biggest threat to Crawford at 147. Just a few weeks prior to Crawford's undisputed win, Ennis blasted Roman Villa out of there.
That's what I said he would do. That it would be a very different fight from the fight that he had before that with Karen Chukatsian. Kind of guy that moves away from the action. Roman moves towards it. And that would give Jaron Ennis all the opportunities he needed to land power shots.
I already see a swell of individuals asking Terrence Crawford to stick around a while longer, stick around long enough to fight Jaron Boots Ennis, but in my previous video we talked about how Terrence Crawford has bigger fish to fry and better options, better for his pockets and better for his legacy. So I don't expect Crawford versus Ennis to come into fruition.
What about Ennis versus Spence?
The main guy I want is Bud. I'll take Spence too, but I think Spence is going up to 154.
They both are.
Before we got to this point, there were those out there trying to turn Ennis versus Crawford into a conversation, and Jaron Ennis himself and his father, they claimed to have been calling Terrence Crawford out. They claimed to have done that, but they went a route.
They went the IBF route.
They've been on the IBF route for over a year now, close to 2, fighting in IBF eliminators at a time when Terrence wasn't IBF champion. So while you're bringing him up in interviews and you're bringing him up into the conversation, why are you vying for a belt that he didn't even have? He only recently won this belt this past Saturday.
He just became IBF champion.
But before that, when the fight between him and Spence was in doubt, and Spence was IBF champion,
when it was looking like the fight between him and Crawford wasn't gonna happen,
he was still IBF champion. If you wanted Crawford so bad, why were you going the IBF route instead of the WBO route?
it's a legitimate question.
Now Jaron Ennis is aiming to become undisputed from 147 up to 168. Given Jaron Ennis's physical dimensions, that he's actually very big for welterweight. Big enough that I think he could do well for himself at junior middle.
And maybe middle, but I think that's a ceiling. Middleweight, 160.
168 sounds like a stretch. I don't care where the opportunity comes, said Ennis to Brian Custer on the Last Stand podcast, as long as I get my opportunity to be undisputed. Normally, opportunities aren't given, they are earned. But keeping in mind his recent track record, Ennis has done just that. Roman Villa is his latest victim.
It's a solid win for Jared Ennis.
But let's be honest, he's not going to get Spence, and he's not going to get Crawford. Those guys have got other things going on.
Yeah.
His opportunity to become an undisputed champion at welterweight is contingent upon his horizons and whether or not he's willing to expand them, because the reset button is about to be hit at 147 pounds.
Yeah.
Alexis Rocha, a Golden Boy Promotions fighter, he's in position to fight for the WBO title. Montes Stanionis is in position to fight for the WBA. Jaron Ennis is in position.
Keith Thurman's in position to fight for the WBC. Jaron Ennis is in position to fight for the IBF. That's the lay of the land.
Ennis is the mandatory challenger under the IBF. Spence is planning to exercise an immediate rematch clause, with the second fight likely to take place at 154 pounds. Thus, Terrence is bound to that fight until Spence makes a decision. Crawford's win has made him the first male undisputed boxer in 2 separate weight classes in the 4-belt era. That goal is noteworthy, but only a footnote when juxtaposed with what Ennis wants to do when his career is all said and done.
My goal is to be undisputed at 47, 54, 60, and 68. We've got some work to do.
Yeah, that sounds good. You want to become a 4-time 4-weight undisputed champion. We'll see if you can do that at welterweight first. And that's why I highlight him having to expand his horizons.
Both Stefan Espinoza and Bozy Ennis, Jaron Ennis' father, admitted on camera that Black Prime reached out to them to do a Crawford fight.
This was obviously before the Errol Spence Jr. fight was made. And Bozy Ennis, Jaron Ennis' father, made it clear that he wanted Showtime to be involved, that even though they don't have a contract with Showtime, he's got to involve them.
We talked about that months ago.
So you made the Crawford fight that you claim to want so bad, your title shot, at a time when Terrence is free. Spence fight wasn't made. He wasn't doing anything. You made that contingent upon Showtime being involved when Black Prime is reaching out to you. You know they did Crawford's last fight.
The Avanesian fight.
You know they've got money. He made an estimated $10 million or something like that from that fight. An obscene amount of money. So if you wanted it so bad, why didn't you strike while the iron was hot? Now, that ship has sailed.
You say you want to become an undisputed champion at 4 weights.
And your father said you don't actually have a contract with Showtime. That means, by all rights, you shouldn't be exclusive to them. That if you want an Alexis Rocha fight in the future, for example, and maybe that ends up being for 2 alphabet titles, are you willing to go to Golden Boy? Are you willing to go to DAZN?
Because the way it is, only 1, maybe 2. Really 1, just 1.
There's really only one potential unification match within arm's reach for Jaron Ennis, and that's in a Montes Stanionis fight. Now, Keith Thurman, if he fights Ugas and he beats Ugas and he becomes WBC champion, a 2-time welterweight champion, if he does that, what are the odds he's going to fight Jaron Ennis?
I don't know. He's got to beat Clarissa Shields first.
Look, in all seriousness, it's hard to conjure. It's hard to imagine that Keith, even if he becomes a champion again, would fight this guy voluntarily. So when he says he wants to become an undisputed champion at...
That's hard enough to do at 1 weight, let alone 4. A 4-time undisputed champion.
Let's see you do it at welterweight first, and let's see if Team Ennis is willing to do what they have to do to bring that into fruition.
And it's not a 1-way street. Takes 2 to tango.
Needs willing dance partners. And I feel like that's where he might get some friction, because at least one of those alphabet titles is on a side of the street where he don't fight on.
So we'll see.
As far as the former champion, Errol Spence Jr., I'm not going to make any excuses. The best man won, and he deserves all my credit. For me, everything is finished. I have nothing to do anymore at 147. I'll go to 154, where I can look better because I'm sure I can still offer a better version of me in another division. To that, former WBO junior middleweight champion Brian Castaño responded by saying, I'll be waiting for you.
I don't think that Errol should run it back with Terrence Crawford if he plans to continue boxing.
He's on a deadline.
Yes.
You know, if they're going to do that rematch, it has to happen this year, where I happen to think, given the beating that he took, Errol should probably take the rest of the year off, if not most of it, and ease himself back into activity, because he got hit a lot.
If you get the shit beat out of you by Terrence Crawford 2 times this calendar year, there goes the neighborhood. There goes your career. Because another beating like that could be career-ending at 47 or 54, wherever.
It's not because of the number of losses, it's because of the damage that he would sustain. 2 beatings like that in the same year?
You will have heard me say this several times this week. A rematch at 154 don't go no different. Same thing's gonna happen.
Errol, whether he exercises that rematch clause or not, seems to be planning to go to junior middleweight. And when he gets there, his old buddy from the amateurs, former WBO junior middleweight champion Brian Castaño, will be waiting for him. Now, Brian hasn't fought since Jermel stopped him over a year ago in their undisputed title fight. So he needs a rebound fight just as much as Errol.
If he can even keep making junior middleweight.
Brian is a physically imposing fighter, albeit not a very tall fighter. He's a shorter, stumpier fighter, very compact, very sturdy, very stocky, given his base style that he's a mid-range to inside fighter just like Errol, but naturally bigger and acclimated to fighting naturally bigger fighters than Errol. He could really be a handful for the former unified welterweight champion up there at junior middle, provided that Brian can keep making junior middle.
You often heard it said that Errol was very big for welterweight, that he was a big welterweight. He was beefy for the weight, but he wouldn't be all that big at junior middle, you know.
No.
There's big kids up there.
Given his base style, he's so physical, mid-range to inside, and that he had good size for a welterweight, that did work for him at welterweight. But at junior middle, where the guys are a little bigger, a little bit more durable,
Hit a little harder.
and they take a better punch, I have serious questions about Errol Spence Jr. and how he will fare. He used to call himself the big fish at welterweight. Will he be fish food at junior middle?
I'm not trying to be negative. I'm being honest. These are legitimate concerns. At a time when people are wondering if he suffered neurological damage.
It's funny that they wait up until after Crawford whoops his ass to start turning into Dr. Scholl's. I mean, that's really convenient that they didn't say that after the Garcia fight or the Ugas fight, and they certainly weren't saying that going into the Crawford fight. But when things don't turn out their way, the way they wanted them to, oh, now he's psychologically damaged or neurologically damaged or whatever it is.
But if they're allowed to speculate, then so am I. And these are legitimate concerns. Errol was a decent-sized welterweight of decent proportions, but at junior middle,
The fighters that move up in weight, what you tend to notice is that these are not physical fighters, more so cerebral fighters.
the fighters that can move up in weight and have success, your Floyd Mayweather, your Andre Ward, your Terence Crawford, Vasyl Lomachenko, Alexander Usyk.
Fighters that can move up in weight and have success because most of what they do doesn't actually rely on physicalities and them being physical with their opponents. Now, every so often, you get a Chocolatito, an offensively minded fighter, a multi-weight champion, obviously Mr. Manny Pacquiao.
The fighting senator, Nonito Donaire.
These are multi-weight champions too, and offensively minded ones, but it feels like
The cerebral guys find more success moving up in weight because they're not relying on physicality as much. Errol is a physical fighter. He tries to bulldoze over guys, mid-range to inside.
with activity, with volume, how will he fare against some of the best and brightest junior middles on the premise that he doesn't activate his rematch clause and he eases himself into activity at 154?
Do you guys think that he can do well up there?